At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. The Concordance Patrol Cutter's stern admonition navigated the interstellar void on a route so routine that his crew measured their shifts by the number of times they checked the same diagnostic. Junior Technician Shakiv, a being of layered matte black plates from a world where bureaucracy was the highest form of art, was on his third shift of watching the void for any deviation from its usual blackness. Shakiv tapped a slender articulated finger against his console, the rhythmic click the only rebellion he could muster against the grand stillness between stars. A light blinked, a polite amber query, anomaly detected. Sub-Prefect, Shakiv chirped, his voice a series of dry clicks and whistles smoothed into concordant standard by his translator. We have a contact. The signature is unusual. Sub-Prefect Olo, a dense cloud of ammoniac gas, contained a polished chrome ovoid who hovered in a personal grav harness, drifted a few centimeters closer. Define unusual, Junior Technician. His voice was a low thrumming frequency from his ovoid's emitters. Archaic, Shakiv replied, and he tapped a resonating tine on his forearm as he cross-referenced the signal against the Concordance archives, a repository of knowledge spanning 100,000 years and 1,000 species. Pre-gravitic, using primitive comms. The fusion signature is inefficient, leaky, almost looks like a micrometeoroid-scarred asteroid had a child with a furnace. The gases around Olo's ovoid swirled. Debris. Log it and move on. The Zom trade lenses require all patrol. But sir, Shakiv persisted, a tremor passing through his plated exoskeleton, the first break in his shift's monotony. The material composition is unusual, and the trajectory is wrong for debris. It's a directed drift from the uncharted veil. He zoomed the external sensors in. On the main screen, an image resolved from the star-dusted blackness. A vessel materialized on screen, unmistakably so, but of a design so archaic it was almost comical. A long wedge of brutalist metal, scarred and pitted by eons of cosmic dust. It tumbled through space, less a vessel under power and more a projectile thrown and forgotten. Run a planetary origin trace. Olo resonated, a low thrum of weary static passing through his emitter. Shakiv worked the console, his articulated fingers keen in the trace command. The archive spun, cross-referencing radiation decay, metallic isotopes, and the vessel's heavy-plated asymmetrical design philosophy. The archive returned an ancient file, buried so deep that it bore a mythological sigil instead of a standard classification, a fanged skull. The console flashed bright red. Alarms, loud and insistent, blared through the stern admonition's bridge. Olo jolted in his harness. Report, he demanded. Shakiv stared at his screen, his manipulator claws frozen. Origin confirmed. He clicked, his voice barely a whisper. It's from Void Corridor 77 Gamma 9. Designation Earth. The alarms cut out, leaving a ringing void. Every crew member, from the navigator whose thoughts were visible as light patterns within its fluid-filled cranium, to the helmsman, a shimmer of contained plasma froze. Earth. The name was a legend, a chilling tale told to frightened hatchlings. A Class 4 Deathworld. A planet of such extreme gravity, atmospheric poison, and relentlessly aggressive predators that the Concordance had filed it under legendary hazards and forbidden any approach within 100 light years. It was a planetary nightmare, a cosmic mistake. This vessel was a ghost ship from a graveyard. Standard protocol. Olo's emitter hummed, the gas within his ovoid compressing. Quarantine. Warn the sector. Prepare to sterilize the vessel with plasma fire. We take every precaution. Sub-Prefect. Shakiv's translator voice trembled slightly. The vessel broadcast a repeating signal on an ancient radio frequency. A distress call from the world of monsters. Olo scoffed. Irrelevant. Arm the plasma cannons. This is a different kind of message, sir, Shakiv clarified. running the signal through a dozen translator algorithms before finding a match in a long-extinct linguistic root. He played it over its comms. A synthesized female voice spoke clearly and calmly through a wash of static, speaking in a forgotten tongue, a single looping phrase. Shakiv's translator flickered, then offered a translation.
This is the UNS Odyssey. We come in peace.
The message was so absurd, so anachronistic, that for a heartbeat, the bridge crew remained motionless. A peace offering from a tomb. Olo's gaseous form contracted. A trick, an ancient trap. The legends describe the dominant species on Earth. Cunning, bipedal predators known for their sudden explosive violence. Sir, Shakiv said, leaning forward, protocol forgotten. May I suggest a deep-range bioscan, just to confirm the vessel is derelict. Destroying an empty can wastes energy. Olo considered this. Wasting energy was an offense against cosmic order.
Proceed, but the moment you detect a microbe with teeth, you fire.
Shakiv dipped his head, his articulated manipulators trembling slightly. He bypassed the standard passive sensors and activated the ship's most sensitive bioscanner, a piece of equipment usually reserved for surveying nascent worlds for the faintest sparks of life. He focused the beam on the Odyssey's scarred hull. The scanner whirred, its delicate instruments parsing layers of radiation shielding an ancient metal. The first two returns were empty. The gases within Olo's ovoid vibrated. A third return came through. A ping, faint but undeniable.
Life signs,
Shakiv announced, the clicks in his voice rising in pitch.
4 of them.
The gases within Olo's ovoid churned with alarm.
Hostile organisms. Larval stage.
No, sir,
Shakiv replied, his voice strained as he brought the readings to the main screen. 4 distinct biological signatures encased in some sort of field. Their metabolic rates were near zero. Their cellular decay halted. Their cryogenic stasis was stable.
They're dormant, and the biological signature matches the dominant bipedal species, the humans.
The only sound in the stern admonitions bridge was the quiet hum of life support. This changed everything. Destroying a derelict ship was protocol. Destroying a tomb containing the last remnants of a legendary species was an act of galactic vandalism. The scientific opportunity was historic. The risk was incalculable. Sub-Prefect Olo, ever the career-minded officer, immediately passed the decision up the chain of command. He opened a secure channel to the confluence, the gilded concordance's heart, and to its supreme leader. The message was simple and terrifying. The ghost ship carried passengers. Praetor Magnar, the concordance's leader, stood in the Praxian chamber's center, a vast room where the only sound was the circulation of filtered air. He was a querent, a being whose form was a cohesive swarm of millions of minute flying organisms. They held a towering, vaguely humanoid shape, and his simple white robes flowed around the shimmering column of his body. The swarm's collective coloration was a deep emerald shifting like wind through a forest. His species valued logic above all else, and for 600 years, Magnar's logic had guided the Concordance to an era of great peace and prosperity. He reviewed the report from the stern admonition. The data streamed through a light column before him. The ship's gravitic design, its unlikely origin, and the 4 life signs held in suspended animation. 4 heartbeats from a world of nightmares. His council advised caution. Zarthus, the bombastic explorer whose holovoids were the most popular in the galaxy, argued for immediate destruction.
These humans are a myth for a reason, Praetor. Their world breeds monsters. What if they carry a plague, or their mere presence destabilizes our harmony?
A Photasi ambassador, a being of coherent light, suggested a century-long quarantine, her form modulating to a somber, low-frequency red to signal deep concern. A logician from the Zobelt, a creature of mathematics given form by contaminant field, presented 1,000 simulations. Only 3 resulted in positive outcome. Magnar processed every argument, his entire being a sensory organ, perceiving the data from 1,000 different perspectives at once. He considered the risk. They were significant.
The humans could be violent, diseased, or so alien in their thinking that they could unravel the interconnected systems of concordant society. The legends were harsh. They spoke of a species that scoured and rebuilt its own world, that fought wars over abstract concepts like gods and honor, a species that packed 100 years of joyful, brutal, and chaotic life into a fleeting lifespan. But then, he considered the opportunity to study a creature from a Class 4 Deathworld, to understand how life could not only survive but thrive under such conditions. The potential knowledge was immeasurable. It was a scientific prize beyond any other. He based his decision when it came on a single calculation. The risk of unknown was high, while losing this unique data point was a certainty. Certain loss was less logical than potential gain.
We will spare the vessel,
Magnar declared, his voice a chorus of 1,000,000 tiny whispers speaking in perfect unison, a sound that echoed in the chamber.
Bring it to the confluence. Prepare the highest level of quarantine in the progenitor dock. We will study these humans.
He paused, the collective hum of his form shaping the alien world.
From a significant and safe distance.
Pain was the first sensation. A dull, throbbing ache that started behind his eyeballs and radiated outward. Javier Reed's second sensation was cold, a deep cellular chill embedded in his bones. He tried to open his eyes, but his lids felt welded shut. A groan escaped his lips, the sound rusty and foreign in his own ears.
Javier, is that you?
Evelyn's voice pierced the fog. Feels like I went 10 rounds with a centrifuge and lost. Javier managed, forcing his eyes open. Darkness met him, punctuated by the faint emergency red glow of the med-base status lights. He found himself strapped to a bio-bed. Across the cramped room, he could just make out 2 other forms beginning to stir.
Cryosickness,
Evelyn stated from his left.
severe. Expect neurological and muscular degradation. Try to move your fingers.
Javier willed his fingers to move. They twitched pathetically.
Check. Dante? Simon?
Evelyn called out. A low grunt answered from another bed. That would be Dante Vega, their security specialist. That grunt could mean a dozen things, but Javier translated it as,
"I'm functional but deeply unimpressed with the current situation."
Present.
A more melodic voice replied, followed by a cough. Dr. Simon Holloway, biologist.
Feels like my head is full of angry bees. Did the mission succeed?
Javier managed to sit up, his muscles burned in protest. The UNS Odyssey's med bay was small, cluttered, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and the scent of hot dust and old circuitry. Their mission. The last thing he remembered was the final countdown, the launch's violent rattle, and the automated voice confirming their trajectory was stable before the cryopods engaged.
Ev, what's our status?
Javier asked, unbuckling his restraints and stumbling over to the main console.
How long were we under?
Working on it,
she said, already at a secondary terminal, keying in a chain of commands without looking at the console. The main screen flickered to life, displaying a stream of diagnostic errors.
Power is minimal. Life support is holding at minimal levels. The main reactor is sputtering, and the chronometer is a gobbled mess.
She typed in a command, rerouting auxiliary diagnostic to triangulate the position from pulsar data. An old, slow method, but reliable. The only sound in the med bay was the terminal's hum as the program ran. A string of numbers appeared on the screen. A date. Javier stared at it. Simon leaned over his shoulder and caught his breath. Dante was now standing, a silent, imposing shadow near the door.
Evelyn,
Simon said, his voice soft.
Run that again. There must be an error. A decimal point in the wrong place. I've run it 3 times,
Evelyn said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual exasperation.
The pulsars don't lie. The date is correct.
They were asleep for just over 3,000 years. The number hung in the air, an anchor pulling them down. Their mission was to be a short one, a 50-year journey to a nearby star system, a test of the first human-crewed cryosleep vessel. Their plan was to return home heroes, when home no longer existed. 3,000 years. Everything and everyone they had ever loved was dust. Less than dust, a forgotten footnote in a history book that had long since crumbled away. "So," Javier said, "I guess we're officially overdue." Before anyone could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life with an utterly alien sound, a soft melodic chime. The wall opposite them shimmered, then dissolved, replaced by a holographic projection. A towering, vaguely humanoid form made of shimmering swarm of emerald green organisms clad in simple white robes stood there. The swarm pulsed, its collective consciousness focused on them. A smooth and strangely calm voice emanated from the projection. The universal translator in their ship's system, automatically kicking in, rendered it in a slow, patronizing tone. The tone resembled one for a toddler or a particularly stupid pet.
"Hello, little creatures,"
the being's chorus of whispers said.
"Remain calm. We are friends."
The last four members of the human race stared in silence. They were adrift in an unfathomable future, the sole survivors of a dead civilization, and their first contact with intelligent alien life involved a conversation suitable for a box of confused puppies. Javier Reed, test pilot and captain, faced the overwhelming and absurd with a lazy grin.
"Well, it's about time," he said. "Pizza's getting cold."
The ship translator, designed for literal factual exchanges, dutifully translated his words. On the transmission's receiving end, a ripple went through Praetor Magnar's cohesive form. His own translator relayed the human's message.
"I acknowledge your arrival. My intent is to consume a celestial body."
Magnar cataloged this. The creature was small, weak-looking, and yet his first communication was a threat of cosmic, almost divine magnitude. He revised his risk assessment of the species.
"Upward, drastically."
Simon shoved Javier aside. He held his hands up, palms open, the ancient universal gesture of peace. He smiled warmly.
"Greetings,"
Simon said, speaking clearly for the translator.
"I am Simon. We are explorers. We mean you no harm. We are lost. Can you help us?"
The great swarm being regarded him for a long moment, tilting its head in a distinctly alien gesture.
"We have logged your request for assistance."
It whispered in unison. The patronizing tone remained.
"Your containment will proceed as scheduled. Please remain calm."
The projection shimmered and vanished, leaving the four humans alone once more in the dim light of the ancient floating tomb. The journey from the Odyssey to their designated quarters resembled a parade of horrified fascination. Guards, clad in sleek silver armor that hummed with contained energy, flanked them. They were a tall and slender species, their limbs double-jointed, allowing for an unsettling fluidity of motion, and their faces were smooth, reflective surfaces. They kept a generous distance, as if humans might exude some kind of Deathworld poison. The path wound through the confluence, a city carved from a hollowed-out moon into 1,000 levels of architecture, illuminated by soaring light conduits, soaring buttresses, and rivers of light. Thousands of aliens, hundreds of different species, paused to stare as they passed. Hulking beings with stony hides, moved with geological slowness, small furry creatures vocalized from observation platforms, and beings that were little more than roiling clouds of sentient gas contained in translucent cylinders. They all stared from behind shining, transparent safety barriers erected along the human's path. A zoo tour, and they were the terrifying new exhibit. Floating alongside them were a swarm of small hovering drones. At their center was a beautiful being, a Medusan, a creature of floating silks and light, her vast bell-shaped body trailing 100 delicate glowing tentacles. These tendrils pulsed in complex rhythms, broadcasting her holovid report across the infosphere. Her core consciousness was a soft glowing sphere within the bell, and it focused on them with a palpable intensity.
That's Illunia.
Their guard escort transmitted, the voice a monotone text scrolling on the handheld consoles provided to them.
Holovid journalist.
The most popular in the sector. Her broadcast reaches over 100 billion viewers. Just then, the rhythm of Illunia's pulsing tentacles quickened. Subtitles appeared on Simon's console, translating the broadcast. Analysis. Subjects exhibit physiological markers of stress. Hypothesis. Overwhelmed by superior environment. Audience sentiment. Peaking. She was narrating their experience to her viewers. Try to look friendly, Simon whispered to the others. Javier responded by winking at one of Illunia's drones. Dante continued to stare forward, his expression unchanging. Evelyn fixed her gaze on a guard's energy rifle, her brow furrowed as if she were disassembling it in her mind and judging its design flaws. Their destination was a vast domed chamber, brightly lit and filled with what was clearly the galactic press corps. Illunia and her drones floated to a central podium. Praetor Magnar stood beside her, his imposing swarm form still and centered. Guards guided the humans to a small raised platform, once again surrounded by a containment field that warped the air.
Please, do not tap the glass.
Magnar spoke, his unified whispers translated into the same deliberate, gentle tone as before. He spoke of the day's historic nature, the miracle of this discovery, and the Concordance's commitment to a safe and peaceful study of these archaic entities. Javier leaned over to Evelyn.
Does anyone else feel like they're about to be neutered and given their first round of shots?
A klaxon blared, high above them. A suspended cargo platform laden with multi-ton blocks of dense materials sputtered. Its anti-grav unit, one of 100 such units floating in the vast chamber, felled with a shower of blue sparks. The platform tilted and a massive container slid off its edge, plummeting directly towards a delegation of small, gelatinous dignitaries from a low-gravity world who were pulsating near the stage. The scene unfolded in a series of sharp, distinct moments. The station's automated safety systems engaged, but the systems calibrated for the confluence's predictable physics were too slow for the chaotic failure of old equipment. A tractor beam was a half-second too slow to lock on. The dignitaries wobbled, too sluggish to move. As the container fell, Dante Vega moved. On Earth, with its crushing 1G of gravity, Dante was a strong, well-trained soldier. Here, on the confluence, with its gravity barely a fraction of Earth's, he was a god. He exploded from the platform, shattering the safety barrier as if it were brittle candy. In 2 bounds, he covered the 30 meters to the dignitary's position. He kept his eyes on the dignitaries, planting his feet, bending his knees, and bracing. The massive container, the size of a small shuttle, slammed against his braced hands and shoulders. The impact drove him down a half meter, the deck plating screaming under the strain, but he held his ground. His back, thick with the muscle of the species born to fight a relentless planetary pull, held firm. With a guttural roar that echoed through the stunned chamber, he absorbed the impact and pivoted, turning its downward plunge into a sideways shove. He heaved his entire body, a fulcrum sending the massive block tumbling into the far wall with a deafening crash of screeching metal, leaving a crater the size of a ground car. Dante stood there for a second, breathing heavily, amidst a cloud of dust and debris. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and then turned and walked back to the platform, stepping over the energy barrier's fizzling remains. The chamber noise died. Across the sector, 100 billion viewers watched, their various respiratory organs stalled. An eddy disturbed Praetor Magnar's swarm form, a visible disruption in his otherwise calm cohesion. Illunia's broadcast tentacles went rigid, pulsing a high-frequency signal that overloaded the translator with a stream of unfilterable astonishment. A single dignitary, a small furry creature near the back, applauded with its upper and lower limbs. Another joined the sound, then a dozen, then 1,000. The chamber erupted in a roar, a cacophony of 100 different forms of applause, clapping, clicking, whistling, vibrating, that washed over the 4 humans. With that act, their status changed from dangerous curiosities to legends. The aftermath was instantaneous and overwhelming. Holovids across the confluence replayed the footage of the Herculean feat on a loop.
Illunia's special report, titled Deathworld or Saviors More Than Just Monsters, broke all previous viewership records. Their prisoner status dissolved, replaced by a fame that echoed across the known galaxy. Gifts and offers inundated their new quarters, a palatial suite with panoramic views of the star-dusted cosmos. A large, garishly colored basket arrived from a company called Burrell's High-G Fitness Gear, fitted with weighted apparel and meal supplements designed for species from worlds with a gravitational pull of 2G or more. It included a handwritten note.
You are an inspiration to heavy worlders everywhere. Burrell.
Javier soaked it in. He lounged on a piece of furniture that might have been a couch or a sleeping pod, juggling 3 glowing orbs sent by society that communicated exclusively through choreographed light patterns.
I could get used to this,
he declared.
We, should have a press agent, a line of action figures, Dante Vega, with container-crushing action.
Dante, for his part, found a quiet corner in the suite and was carefully disassembling and cleaning his standard-issue sidearm, an object so mechanically archaic by concordant standards that it was technically an antique. He ignored the frantic messages piling up on his handheld console, most of which were offers to endorse everything from structural support beams to personal security services. Evelyn, however, paced the room.
This is a logistical nightmare,
she muttered, tipping over a pile of silk-like cloths gifted by a species of giant silkworms.
We're scientific anomalies, not celebrities. Our primary objective should be to ascertain the fate of Earth and establish a stable long-term survival strategy.
To that end, she petitioned Magnar for supervised access to the Odyssey, citing the need for proprietary diagnostic tools to analyze the long-term effects of their 3,000-year cryosleep. Seeing a chance to appear magnanimous to his new celebrities, Magnar granted it, on the condition that Concordance officials could monitor their activities remotely. It was a compromise Evelyn was more than willing to make.
"I'd not, Bev,"
Javier said, effortlessly catching the orbs.
"We're the biggest thing since sliced glorebacks. Let's ride the wave."
"I'm with Evelyn," Simon interjected, looking up from a handheld console displaying dozens of interview requests.
"This fame is precarious. It rests on a single reflexive action. We need to thoughtfully manage our public perception, present ourselves as a rational, dignified species."
The absurdity of his own statement, given that they were the entire species, made him pause. The weight of that fact settled in his gut. Overwhelmed, they retreated to the only familiar place in the universe. An hour later, they were sitting in the cramped mess hall of the UNS Odyssey, still docked and quarantined, a little piece of home amidst the cosmic strangeness. The air was thick with the musty smell of old wiring and stale life support. It was perfect. Evelyn managed to get the replicator to produce 4 reconstituted ration blocks, a bland substance rich in nutrients that tasted vaguely of cardboard and regret. They aided in comfortable silence, the familiar awful taste, a grounding experience.
This is better,"
Dante said, his first full sentence of the day. He broke his ration block in half with a decisive snap.
"Yeah, it is home,"
Simon agreed in a low voice. It's a flying brick with the ambience of a forgotten closet," Javier countered, though he was eating his block with as much gusto as anyone.
"But it's our flying brick."
Evelyn finished with her meal, retreated to her natural habitat, a humming maintenance console in the engine room, which was visible from the mess. She seemed to find comfort in the familiar glow of her diagnostic screens. After a few minutes of quiet tapping, she called out to them.
"That's odd," she said, her brow furrowed. "I'm running a deep structural scan trying to see what parts the aliens have been poking at."
"Find anything?"
Javier asked.
"Yes," she replied, her voice tight with intrigue. "In addition to the ship, something absent from all the original manifesto blueprints, tucked behind the primary coolant manifold. There's a heavily encrypted data core. It's shielded, self-contained, and completely sealed."
The 3 men joined her in the engine room, a cramped space filled with the barely functioning fusion reactor's low hum. Evelyn had the location up on her screen, the ship's schematic showing a single, blinking red box. A ghost in their machine. A secret that had traveled with them across 3,000 years of silent darkness.
"Welcome back to Luminous Lens, the show that illuminates the galaxy."
Luna's voice was a melodic chime,
and her broadcast tentacles pulsed with a soft, inviting rhythm of gold and silver light that her translator rendered as joyful welcome.
Tonight, we are honored to have two of the Confluence's most celebrated new residents, the humans, Simon and Javier.
The studio audience, a vibrant menagerie of alien life, erupted in a chorus of appreciative sounds. Simon, dressed in a clean uniform, smiled graciously and gave a slight bow. Javier, lounging in his chair with a smirk, gave the crowd a two-fingered salute.
So,
Ilunia turned her large, dark eyes to Javier.
Your popularity has surged, especially among my species. The Metusans are captivated by your unconventional charisma.
Well, I try,
Javier said with a shrug.
It's a Deathworlder thing. We're born with rugged good looks and a charming disregard for authority.
Simon suddenly kicked him under the table.
I've studied your language, Ilunia continued, and I find its idioms fascinating. A Medusan linguist has prepared a phrase for you. He says it's a high compliment in your ancient tongue, meant to convey deep appreciation for another's beauty.
She tilted her head.
Would you honor me by saying it?
A handheld console materialized in front of Javier, displaying a phonetic phrase. He glanced at it, then at Ilunia's graceful, glowing form. He figured it was something like, "You have a lovely glow." He wanted to be charming. He wanted to lean into his new celebrity status. He stood up, cleared his throat, and read the phrase with all the confidence he could muster. Then, following the sub-instructions he hadn't bothered to read fully, he performed the accompanying gesture, a slight dip of the head followed by a slow, deliberate wave of his hands, mimicking the gentle sway of her tentacles. A collective gasp went through the Medusans in the audience. Ilunia herself froze, her tentacles flaring rigidly in a pattern of shocking magenta light. Her translator flashed a single startling word: proposal. He had, with the pronunciation and form the sub-instructions had deemed flawless, performed a formal Medusan mating ritual. Simon's face turned pale. He buried his head in his hands. The broadcast, already a smash hit, went viral. Javier became the single most eligible bachelor for an entire species of floating jellyfish people. For the rest of the show, a flustered Simon had to diplomatically deflect questions from Ilunia's relatives in the audience about dowry negotiations and optimal larval drift coordinates. Javier's grin vanished. He stood, speechless. While Javier was accidentally proposing to the most famous journalist in the galaxy, Evelyn was in the Odyssey's engine room facing the mysterious data core. She had tried to interface with it using the ship's computers, but the encryption was a layered adaptive construct she had never encountered before. She requested access to Concordance decryption software, and the aliens, eager to please their new heroes, provided it. The alien programs were miracles of logical engineering, elegant and sharp. They approached the core's encryption by analyzing petabytes of data, searching for a single flawed logic gate to exploit. And they failed, every single time. The delicate alien tools slid off the core's chaotic, brutalist security wall. Frustration coiled inside her. She paced the engine room, glaring at the stubborn piece of hardware. The alien approach was too smart, too refined. This encryption resembled a Gordian knot more than a complex lock, and she knew how to solve those. "If you can't outthink it," she muttered to herself, a phrase her old engineering mentor used to repeat. Outstupid it. A simple, colossally reckless plan formed in her mind. She would blow the doors off its hinges. She spent the next hour rerouting power conduits, scraping her knuckles on the ancient metal. The data core had its own isolated power circuit, a failsafe to protect it from ship-wide surges. Evelyn bypassed it, connecting the core's delicate, sophisticated security layer directly to the Odyssey's main capacitor bank. It was like hooking up a light bulb to a fusion reactor. She stood back, put on a pair of thick safety goggles, and took a deep breath. She initiated the charge. The lights in the engine room dimmed as the capacitors drew power, their hum rising to a piercing whine. The air grew thick with the acrid scent of burnt polymers. "Fire in the hole," she whispered, and slammed her fist down on the discharge button. A blinding flash of cerulean light erupted from the access panel, a loud crack like a whip crack, and the sharp smell of burnt electronics. The ship's lights flickered violently and then stabilized. A tendril of smoke drifted from the data core's housing. For a moment, she feared she had fried the entire thing. but her readout showed a different result. The alien-made security layer, with all its elegant complexity, vaporized in the raw brute force energy surge. But the foundational data storage underneath, a robust, heavily shielded system built with rugged, ancient human tech, was intact. The ship's old computers now interfaced with it. She called the others. They gathered around her console, their faces illuminated by the flickering screen as the first decrypted file opened. It was a video file. The face of a man unfamiliar to them appeared, a grim-faced general with tired eyes, wearing a uniform from a coalition that must have formed after they left. The time step on the recording was dated just hours after their launch.
To the crew of the Odyssey,
the general began, his voice heavy with a terrible finality.
Your primary mission has been scrubbed. You are now engaged under Protocol Arcfall. Your mission was a lie. You were never a simple test flight. You are an Ark.
He gestured off screen. The image changed to a tactical map of Earth, covered in angry red markers that were converging, multiplying, consuming continents.
We don't know what it is. An extrasolar weapon, a geological chain reaction, something we awoke. It doesn't matter. It's a global extinction event. Unsurvivable. We had less than a day's warning.
The image switched again, this time to a schematic of the Odyssey's cargo bay, highlighting hidden compartments.
Your ship carries the last hope for humanity. Viable genetic samples, a full genomic library, fertilized embryos in deep freeze, everything needed to restart our species. Your new mission is to find a habitable world, to preserve the light of mankind.
The general's face returned, the image distorting with static. Explosions sounded in the background.
We're out of time. Godspeed, Odyssey. You're all that's left.
The file ended. The screen went dark. The general's voice faded, leaving only the reactor's low hum. They were the last embers of a fire extinguished 3,000 years ago. Javier's sarcastic grin vanished, replaced by a pale, drawn look. Evelyn stared at her console, her expression hardening into a clinical detachment that shielded her from the chasm that had just opened beneath them. Simon was openly weeping, silent tears streaming down his face. Dante stood perfectly still. His hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. They were 4 crew members, and they were the entire human race. The weeks that followed were a strange cocktail of private grief and public absurdity. The crew kept their secret locked away, a shared burden that bound them closer than ever. Outwardly, their celebrity spiraled. Javier's disastrous talk show appearance only made him more popular. Dante's unintentional spiritual movement gained followers daily. They were galactic darlings, and the pressure mounted. The most surreal of these episodes involved Dante. Still grappling with the immense stress of being one of humanity's last hopes, he took to a grounding exercise his old commanding officer had taught him. It involved a series of small, controlled, almost imperceptible muscle contractions and breathing techniques designed to manage anxiety in high-pressure situations. His newfound fame, however, afforded him little privacy. He was invited as a guest of honor to a ceremony held by the Ponders of Zoom, a species of tall, translucent, plant-like beings who prized absolute stillness and silence as the highest state of being. The ceremony involved sitting motionless on a dais for 3 hours while the Zoom communed through subsonic hums. For Dante, it was torture. Trapped with his thoughts and the weight of their secret, he performed his grounding exercises. A subconscious jiggle of his leg, a slow, deliberate crack of his neck, a controlled tensing and relaxing of his shoulders. To him, it was a desperate attempt to keep from screaming. To the Ponders of Zoom, it was a revelation. They interpreted his tiny, fidgety movements as a profound, esoteric meditation technique, a new philosophy of kinetic tranquility.
His neck crack was a severing of the ego from the physical form. His leg jiggle, a method of tapping into the universe's vibrational energies. He left the ceremony hailed as a guru, the unintentional founder of a new philosophical movement called the Vega Contemplation. Disciples attempted to emulate his techniques, resulting in a rash of minor neck sprains across the confluence. Dante remained completely unaware of the spiritual revolution he started. Their fame, however, had its detractors. Zarthus, a towering avian with luminous plumage and an ego to match, an egomaniacal celebrity explorer whose show, Zarthus's Grand Galactic Gauntlet, had been the top-rated program for decades, saw his popularity plummeting. These archaic humans were stealing his spotlight, and his massive ego refused to abide it. During a live broadcast, he issued a public challenge. "These humans have proven themselves strong," he announced to the galaxy, his voice dripping with condescension. "But strength without finesse is merely clumsiness. I, Zarthus, challenge the crew of the Odyssey to run my gauntlet of grandness. Let us see if the overrated relics can handle a true test of galactic skill, or if they are just lucky." The challenge electrified the infosphere. Illunia's network immediately framed it as the Clash of Eras, Legend versus Legacy. Within an hour, it became the most anticipated media event of the cycle. Magnar himself lacked the political capital to shut it down without risking a massive political backlash. The humans, still reeling from their private burdens, now faced a very public spectacle. "He's baiting us," Simon said, watching a replay of Zarthus' challenge in the Odyssey's cargo bay. "He wants to humiliate us on a galactic stage."
Good.
Javier replied, chalking up his hands as he eyed a makeshift jungle gym Evelyn had welded together from spare conduits and hull plating.
I'm tired of being a museum piece. Let's give him a show.
Their training was a study in human ingenuity. While Zarthus and his team of elite athletes trained in advanced holographic simulators, the humans trained in their dusty, cavernous cargo bay. Evelyn, the engineer, built contraptions to simulate the Gauntlet's challenges. A spinning centrifuge made from a spare gyroscope tested their balance. A wall of repurposed cargo netting became a climbing challenge. Javier, the captain, became the strategist. He spent hours watching old recordings of Earth football plays, adapting them for an obstacle course.
Okay, Dante, you're the offensive line. You clear a path. Simon, you're on decoy. Evelyn, you find the structural weaknesses in the puzzle. I'll be the quarterback. I'll run the ball and get all the glory.
Simon, the diplomat, became their opposition researcher. He analyzed hundreds of hours of Zarthus' show, identifying his weaknesses. "He's vain," Simon pointed out, pausing a clip of Zarthus preening for a camera after a simple jump. "He always plays to the crowd. He'll take the flashy route over the efficient one, and he underestimates anyone he sees as archaic." And Dante, the soldier, trained. While the others strategized, he prepared his body. He was lifting the Odyssey's landing gear, using the massive hydraulic struts for reps, his muscles straining under a load meant for a multi-ton spacecraft. They were disorganized and were four broken people carrying a monumental secret. But in that cargo bay, they were a team. The day of the Gauntlet of Grandness was a media frenzy. The arena was packed. Illunia was providing live commentary, her tentacles pulsing with a rapid rhythm, her translator subtitled as Nervous Anticipation. Zarthus and his team, clad in sleek matching uniforms, entered to a roar of applause. They moved in perfect synchronization, each step and gesture honed to perfection. Then came the humans. They wore their standard ship jumpsuits. They walked into the arena. They looked less like athletes and more like a maintenance crew that had taken a wrong turn. The starting signal blared. Zarthus' team shot off the line, moving over the first set of obstacles. The humans' movements were clumsy by comparison. Javier tripped almost immediately. Simon got tangled in a rope net. Their start was a comedy of errors. But they were competing with grit. At the first major obstacle, a wide chasm, Zarthus' team used high-tech anti-grav discs to float across. The humans relied on a different method. Dante braced himself at the edge, and Simon and Evelyn climbed onto his back, forming a human ladder for Javier to scramble up to a higher ledge.
Then, in a move that drew a collective gasp from the arena, Dante grabbed Javier by the jumpsuit and, with a mighty heave, threw him across the gap. They were clumsy and undignified. Their chaotic tangle of limbs and shouted instructions produced surprising speed, a performance the commentators began calling brute force ballet. The final challenge was a logic puzzle, a fluctuating wall of data that required the teams to chart a stable path through a chaotic energy field. Zarthus' team worked meticulously, logically, searching for the single correct solution. Evelyn took one look at the data streams. "I've seen this before," she breathed. "This isn't a sequence. It's a simulation of a decaying AI's targeting data. It's from an old Earth naval cannon. There is no single correct path. The system is designed to be unpredictable." "So how do we solve it?" Javier asked, breathing hard. "We don't," Evelyn said, and a fierce grin spread across her face. "We break it. A system like this has fail-safes against overload. If you can't find the right key, use 100 wrong ones at the same time." While Zarthus' team was still searching for one answer, the humans input dozens of commands at once, random, chaotic, contradictory solutions. The puzzle wall flickered, sputtered, and then, with a loud chime, a single path cleared. They sprinted to the finish line, collapsing just past it seconds before Zarthus' team found their elegant, logical, and ultimately slower solution. The humans won. Their victory was ugly, chaotic, and spectacular. They had proven that sometimes the best way to handle chaos was to become more chaotic. In his silent Praxian chamber, Praetor Magnora watched a replay of the gauntlet. He focused on the final puzzle. He had designed it himself, secretly feeding the gauntlet's programmers the data from a very real and very persistent problem that had plagued the Concordance for months. The humans had found a solution in under a minute. He summoned them to his chambers. When they arrived, the patronizing tone vanished from his translator. His voice was a unified chorus of whispers of a commander addressing his peers.
"Your performance in the gauntlet was illuminating," Magnor began. "The final puzzle was more than a game. It was a simulation based on the tactical data from a derelict automated mining station in the Athelstan Nebula. The AI is ancient, degrading, and has recently reactivated. Its automated defense systems are firing erratically, targeting a vital trade route."
He brought up a star chart showing the nebula and the red line of the closed trade route.
"Concordance tactics are failing. Our fleets rely on predictable logic and overwhelming force. The station's defenses are illogical and unpredictable. We send a battleship, it ignores it. We send a scout, it obliterates it. Its behavior is, for lack of a better word, insane. A pattern eludes us. You found one."
Standing beside Magnor, a Medusan aide taking notes pulsed her tentacles in a quick, subtle pattern. Javier caught the movement. His handheld console, still subscribed to the Medusan cultural updates after his talk show fiasco, provided a quiet translation. Affectionate approval. He quickly looked away, a faint blush on his cheeks, much to Simon's undisguised dismay.
"We do not need your strength or your technology,"
Magnor continued, his collective consciousness fixed on them.
"We have an abundance of both. We need your perspective. Your species was forged in chaos. You seem to possess a unique aptitude for managing it. I am asking you to look at this problem and find a weakness my logical analysts have missed."
The four humans exchanged a look. This was no game. This was a real crisis. A chance to be more than just celebrities or relics. A chance to be useful.
"We'll help,"
Javier said, his voice steady.
"But we do it our way, and we'll need our ship."
Back on the Odyssey, the atmosphere was charged. For the first time, they had a real mission. Station senses are sophisticated, Evelyn explained, pointing at a schematic Magnor had provided. They can detect the energy signatures of any modern concordant ship from light minutes away. But the Odyssey, all technology, is so fundamentally archaic, so foundational, it registers as harmless debris. Their sensors will likely misclassify us as debris or a low-level radiation anomaly. We can get close. Close enough to do what? Simon asked. Evelyn smiled. It was the same wild, brilliant smile she had had before blowing the data core security. The AI is old. It's unstable. It's like a faulty logic board. What happens when you feed a faulty board a chaotic, overwhelming stream of junk data? It crashes. Javier finished, a light in his eyes. Exactly, Evelyn confirmed. We'll give it a fatal error. We'll use our unshielded wideband comms dish to broadcast a targeted, high-energy stream of unadulterated nonsense directly at the station's core programming. It will overwhelm its processing capacity. I call it cosmic static. The system will overload and shut down. The plan was simple, dangerous, and deeply, beautifully human. An information assault on a galactic scale. Navigating the Athelstan Nebula was like flying through a graveyard of stars. Javier sat at the Odyssey's helm, his hands gripping the controls with a focused intensity he hadn't felt in years. The view screen was a maelstrom of swirling gas clouds, asteroids, and the deadly sporadic blast of plasma fire from the mining station's automated defenses. This is better than any simulator. Javier yelled over the engine's roar, executing a barrel roll that threaded the ship between two converging beams of laser fire. He treated the whole thing like the greatest video game he had ever played, just like flying the Canyons back home. His casual confidence was a stark contrast to the chaos erupting around them. A stray shot from a defense drone struck the port engine nacelle, rupturing a vital power conduit.
I'm losing power to the shields!
Evelyn shouted from her station.
The conduit's compromised!
I'm on it,
came Dante's voice over the comms. A moment later, his tethered form clambered out of the airlock and onto the ship's hull. He moved with a practiced calm, even as defense drones swarmed around the ship like angry hornets. He reached the damaged conduit, sparks showering his suit, and with his gauntleted hands, he braced himself against the hull and forced the two severed, sparking ends of the conduit back into contact. Arcs of raw energy washed over his suit's insulation, and he let out a pained grunt as he physically held the connection against the conduit's violent resistance. The ship's shields flickered back to life. In the cockpit, Simon was the cool voice of reason coordinating with the Concordance fleet that hung back at a safe distance. He analyzed the station's erratic firing patterns, feeding the data back to the waiting battleships.
The firing sequence is not random.
He announced, his eyes darting across his screen.
It's a fractal. The Mandelbrot set. It's targeting points based on a chaotic mathematical pattern. Magnar, if your fleet positions themselves at these coordinates, you should be safe.
On the bridge of the Concordance destroyer's Stillness, a Zoom captain received the data.
Chaotic, but pattern is clear. It hummed. Adjust all firing solutions to the human's coordinates. Fire on his mark.
On the bridge of the Concordance flagship, Praetor Magnar watched a human diplomat teach his tactical officers about 3,000-year-old chaotic mathematics, while another human physically held the ancient ship together under fire. His assessment of the species was revised once again.
We're in range,
Javier shouted.
Evelyn, it's all you!
Evelyn's fingers moved swiftly across her console. Diverting all power from the non-essential systems to the main comms array, she announced, her voice tight with concentration. The ship's lights dimmed, the hum of life support dropped to a whisper. Every spare watt of power was channeled to the communications dish.
What's our ammo?
Javier asked. Humanity's greatest hits, Evelyn replied with a grim smile. She initiated the broadcast. A torrent of data, a chaotic, weaponized stream of human culture shot out from the Odyssey and slammed into the ancient mining station. The first volley was music, the soaring, complex harmonies of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, the raw power of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the frantic energy of 100 different punk rock anthems. The second volley was literature, Shakespearean sonnets, poetry by Dickinson, the opening lines of 1,000 novels, all read by different synthesized voices at once. The third was raw, unfiltered information. A live feed of 3,000 years of stock market data, the entire text of Wikipedia, mathematical equations, philosophical treatises, and thousands upon thousands of recipes for cake. The station's defense grid flickered. Its drones spun erratically, firing at each other. Its AI, an entity designed for the cold, predictable logic of mining asteroids, was being drowned in a flood of emotion, art, contradiction, and absurdity. Then Evelyn sent the final file. A massive compendium she found deep in the Odyssey's cultural archives. A file labeled Cats Falling Off Things. The station's lights flared brilliantly, then went dark. The automated defenses, the swarming drones, the plasma cannons, they all went silent. The AI, faced with the ultimate unexplicable chaos of a cat misjudging a jump, collapsed into total systems failure. On the news feed back at the Confluence, Zarthus watched a live broadcast of the Odyssey floating victoriously in the now silent nebula. He crushed the beverage bulb in his taloned hand, his grand ego finally and definitively defeated by a video of a kitten falling off a sofa. In the aftermath, a transmission came through from Praetor Magnar. His image appeared on the main screen, and for the first time, he gave a slow, deliberate dip of his head, a querent gesture of respect.
On behalf of the gilded concordance,
he whispered in unison, his voice stripped of all artifice,
I thank you. You have saved countless lives and reopened a vital corridor for the concordance. You came to us as relics. Today, you stand as our allies.
He paused, his collective consciousness seeming to focus on each of them in turn.
The Concordance would like to formally offer you membership, full citizenship, and with it, the complete and total resources of all civilization. We will help you search the galaxy for any other human survivors who may exist. We will help you find a new world to call your own.
The final scene found the four of them weeks later in the palatial suite they'd first received. This time, it felt less like a gilded cage and more like a home. They stood before a massive, floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the breathtaking alien starscape of the confluence. Stars, nebulae, and the graceful transit of 100 different ships painted a scene of profound grandeur. Javier held up a glass filled with a fizzing green liquid and admirer scent. The other three held matching glasses. The weight of their past settled between them, a counterpoint to the wantonly bizarre vastness of their future. They were alone, the last of their kind, yet they had each other. To the last humans, Javier toasted, his voice quiet. Evelyn, for whom a smile was a rare event, looked at him, then at Dante and Simon. A small, genuine smile touched her lips as she clinked her glass against his. To the fast, she said.